Hey everybody, welcome to the 6th episode of the Network Automation series, and today we're going to deviate away from doing network configuration and we're going to look at a tool called Git. Now, if you've never heard of Git, Git is a version control system that we can use to interact with an online repository like GitHub, and we can take the folders that we've been working with and the files underneath of them and start tracking changes to those files. So if you've been watching since day one, we've kind of built out this folder structure. We've started with show commands, we started with the basic system config, and then we moved on to the interface config. Now, version control would have been really interesting with the interface config, because when we started, we had a single task in here called configure interfaces, and that single YAML file did everything. It set our interfaces up, it configured layer 3, and then after we set that up and we moved into configuring layer 2, we started to realize there's some other things we need to do from a task perspective that we want to break this stuff out. If I had stored all of this in a version control system and used Git to push it to GitHub, we would have been able to go back and see all the changes that have occurred over a period of time. So we would have seen the name of this change. We would have seen where I removed the layer 3 configurations out of here and moved them into a separate file, because we would have seen the file get added. We'd have seen where we added features, VLANs, layer 2 interfaces, and all of this would have been tracked with Git through GitHub. And if I wanted to go back and take a look at how things had evolved, I could go back and review the changes that have occurred over time. So it's a really powerful tool, and if you start thinking about it from a network engineering perspective, if we had our own private repositories, like a GitLab environment or some other kind of Git instance, we could store things like configuration files, running configs, and use Git to track, like, here's device 1, here's the running config. You could maintain source control for that file and get a better idea of how your network has evolved over a period of time. So what we want to do today is we want to get all of this into a folder for pushing up to Git. I haven't thought about the file name yet, but we're going to create a folder to store all this. And then we need to come to GitHub, and I have this up right here. We're going to create a new repository. We're going to create an SSH key on the automation host to set up in GitHub, and we're going to start moving up all the files from the network automation host up to GitHub. I'm going to show you how to do everything from start to finish. So let's go back to the network automation host and start configuring our Git setup. So on the automation jump host, what I want to do is I want to create a new folder. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to call this CML Ansible Automation. So that's going to be the name of the folder we're going to move everything into. I'm going to select the basic system config, the interface config, and the show commands directories. I'm going to drag them into the CML Ansible Automation directory. And the reason I'm doing this is I want to have a single folder where all of my automation's sitting, all the things that I want to push up to Git are sitting, and I don't want them mixed in with the base level files that are sitting in my home directory. So if I look here, I have this one folder, but if I do the ls-la, you can see there's a lot of additional folders here, and I really don't want my Git configuration or Git init sitting in this folder. I would rather have it in a build directory, and in this case, it'll be the CML Ansible Automation. So in order to get all of this set up, there's two things we need to do. We need to create an SSH key that we can use to work with GitHub. And to do that, we're going to come back to Git in our Firefox browser. And if you don't have an account yet, go ahead and pause and create an account with GitHub. It's totally free. But what we're going to do once you have the account is we're going to come up to the upper right-hand corner here, and we're going to go to Settings. And over on the left, there is an option for SSH and GPG keys. For our use case, we want to create a new SSH key. Now, there's a guide to connecting to GitHub using SSH keys. And since I know how to create an SSH key, but I want to see what their recommendations are, I'm going to open this up in a new window. And we're going to look at generating a new SSH key and adding it to the SSH agent. And I think all I'm worried about is creating the SSH key. And so if we scroll here, it says generating a new SSH key. We're going to use SSH-keygen with this -t for ED255519. For this, we're just going to use this particular setup because this does say if you're using a legacy system, it doesn't support it, and I know the Ubuntu host will support it. We're going to take that SSH-keygen command, and we're going to come back to our host. We're going to go into .sh, and I'm going to paste it. Now, the -c is for putting in a comment, and it's said in GitHub to use your email address. I'm just going to do my name on GitHub, which is Rogue Router, and I'm going to do Rogue Router at Git. We're going to save it in that .sh folder with that ID ED25519. We're not going to use a passphrase, and it's going to be created. If we look now in the .sh folder, I have this ID ED25519.pub. We're going to want to cat that file, and we can see the SSH key. If we copy it, I just right-clicked and it's copied it. We can now come back, and we can go to Settings again, and we can do New SSH Key, and I'm going to call this Automation Jump Host because that's the name of the host where this key is sitting, and it just lets me know what SSH key it's for. So if I ever delete the Automation Jump Host, or I have another host that's like Automation Jump Host 2, I know which key goes to which one. So I'm going to do Add SSH Key. And now we can do a quick verify. If we come back, we can do Test Your SSH Connection, and it just says use this SSH-T git at github.com. Did not want to do that. Cancel. Do copy. We'll come back and we will paste that in, and we can see the SSH key is working. So we're able to authenticate with Git. This is what's going to allow us to actually start pushing our configurations up to GitHub. The next thing we need to do is create a repository in GitHub to actually allow us a place to store the files and folders that we're going to move up to Git today. So if we come back, we go home. It's still docs. Go back. So we're back on my profile. Go back one more. We're going to do new. And I'm going to match the name of the repository to the name of my folder. And then I'm going to do CML network automation using Ansible as the description. I'm going to make it public because I want to be able to share this with you after we put this video out. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to create the repository. I'm not going to add a README file because I'm going to add a README file once we actually start adding the files to this repository. So we'll create it. And it's going to come back and say, hey, if you want to create a new repository on the command line, here's how you do it. So we can echo, and if you don't know what echo is, it's a Linux command that allows you to echo things onto the command line. In this case, it's doing 2 dashes, which is allowing us to append that information to README, or I should say 2 carets. It's allowing us to append that information to README, and basically all it's going to do is create a header called CML Network Automation in the README file. The next thing is going to be git init, which is going to initialize that folder to work with Git. If we did this exactly the way it says, we would add this README file that we just created. We would commit it with a message of first commit. We could do a git branch, and this -m would change the name of it to main. By default, it sets it to master. It has some suggestions once you create it, like you could do main, you could do whatever you want. Then we're going to do a git remote add of the origin, which is the Linux host, to the repo that we just created, which is this CML_Ansible automation.git, which matches the link up here in my browser. And so that adds the Git, adds the address that we want to add the Git information to, and then we're going to push it. So we're going to take the data that we have on our local host and push it up to the Git repository. So let's go ahead and work through this, and we're going to start with going to our Ansible automation directory, and I'm going to do a new file called readme.md. We're going to do a single quote or pound, and we're going to do CML automation using Ansible. This is a repository containing all the files used to create the network automation series CML using Ansible. And so that'll be our line. That's all we're going to put in there. If we cd .ssh and we cd to the CML automation directory, we're going to do a git init. So you can see that it's going to use master as the name for the initial branch. The default branch name is subject to change. So if you want to change it, we can do that. You can do main, master, trunk, development. This is just what it created by default, which was master. So we are going to change that. But what we're going to do is we're going to do a git add. We're going to do that README file. And then we're going to add our folders. So basic system config, interface config, and show commands. And if you watch to the left, we should see where our files, maybe not yet because we haven't finished doing it. But we'll see where there's some change that occurs with these files where it indicates that it's now being managed with Git. So let's go back. The next step would be to do a Git commit. So we're going to do a Git commit. And our message is going to be first push of the network automation series Ansible files. And so when you commit, you're always going to put a message in there, and it's to let people know, what was the source of the change, what was the reason for the commit. And in this case, it's the first push. You might do an update to the files, and you might indicate, hey, these files changed, and this is what the updates were. So you can see now that we pushed, or we've created the message. It's created in marker of all the files and things that we want to copy up. We're going to change the Git branch. We're going to change the name of it, and we're going to call it main instead of master. And then we're going to do this remote add origin to the Git file folder sitting up here in GitHub. And then the last thing we do is this git push. And so now everything we've got sitting here is sitting up in the Git repository on GitHub. We took all of the files that we've worked with, we've moved everything up, and if we come back, we should be able to refresh this screen and see all of the files that we have worked with on our system are now sitting in GitHub. We've got our basic system config, we've got the group vars, we can look at the files and see what's inside of them, go to the interface config. Again, all the things that we've done so far, it's all sitting here. It's nicely formatted, so our YAML still looks like YAML. It's code that we can take a look at. You can also click on raw now and see the raw output of this. You could now copy and paste this and put it right back. So if this was like a sample that you liked and you wanted to look at and maybe use for your own automation, it's sitting here in a way that you could just grab a sample and just pull it out. If we were to go back and do it here, I think you end up with the numbers on the side. So we'll just do a quick copy. And then I'm going to paste it. And it doesn't look like it. It actually looks like it came fine. Let me try it in a different folder. Let's do it here. Okay. But one thing that's interesting is you can see on the left, by adding that little block. So it didn't add the numbers. I've seen that in the past where it does show those numbers, so they may have updated that code area on GitHub. You can see this green detail where it's showing us the local changes and what we've added. Now, if I were to delete, we would see red now. We could see where we've got the debug is gone. So by using Visual Studio Code, this is like one of the awesome things about using Visual Studio Code. When you start using it with Git, as you start making changes, you can see where you've removed things, added things. It'll give you some visual, which I'm surprised it hasn't done it yet. Normally says, hey, something's changed here. And now it is, but normally when you first do that add of all the things to Git, it shows green, everything's been modified, needs to be added. But in this case, we can see, even if we didn't see the folder open, show commands has a dot next to it. We can see show interface has changes in it. So we can see all those changes. We can click anywhere in here to see what the changes are. I'm going to delete everything because we don't really want to change everything. And what should happen, the modified is gone. So nothing has changed. But now all of our data is sitting out in GitHub, a place for us to kind of look at it and work with it in the future. So that's a real quick overview of Git. We're going to cover more about it going forward, as we start modifying files, taking a look at it. But I wanted to show you how we get the data pushed out there and what you're going to see when you start working with it on your own. If you want to grab this automation, let me go back. I'm going to add this link to the video. All you have to do is copy this URL to the clipboard, and on your own Linux host, if you don't have it, you can always do a quick sudo apt install git. Just make sure you have Git installed, and then we're going to do it in a different folder. Come back here, test copy. I'm going to cd to test copy, and I'm going to do git clone paste. And we'll see that the Ansible automation is in that directory. I don't know why it hasn't updated over here yet. Refresh, there we go. So we can see that we've cloned that CML automation that's sitting out in GitHub down to the local host, and we can start working with it. Everything that I've done over the last several episodes is here, ready for you to start working with. And you can grab the CML lab, which I'll also share, and basically just take this and start running with it. But just that quickly, I pushed everything that we've done over the last several episodes and put it out to Git and showed you really quickly how you can take and clone that Git repository down to your local Ubuntu host or whatever Linux host or Windows host you're using so that you can start working with the files that we've created. So let me know what you think. If this was a helpful video, I'd love your feedback. And as always, thanks for watching.